Hey there, folks. Welcome back to another astrological report. This is for August 12 through August 18 of 2025. I hope everybody's doing well. So looking at the chart, it looks like this week we don't have a ton of major aspects happening, but we do have a couple things going on here. And the main event is going to be that Mercury is now direct. And the aspects this week is that Mercury is sextile Mars. What's interesting about this is that there's actually going to be two exact sextiles for Mercury and Mars this week. The first one on August 14 and the final one on August 17. And that's happening because right now Mercury is very slow coming off of that retrograde station at 4 degrees here. And so Mars is actually moving faster than Mercury, which normally Mercury is moving faster than Mars. So Mars is kind of coming into this sextile with Mercury, and then Mercury is going to build up momentum forward and catch back up to make another sextile with Mars. And then by next week, Mercury will overtake that and be faster than Mars and moving forward. So even though they're exact on August 14, which is Thursday, and Sunday, August 17, I would consider them sextile all week long. So that's very beneficial for everything about Mercury and overall our action. And this is especially helpful for Mars because Mars is in a sign that it's not happy and it's in its debilitation here. And it's ruling this world point of all these transits in Aries right now. So Mars is usually, the warrior planet, the action planet. Mars is about the self and what we do for the self in a lot of ways. But now Mars is in Libra. And so we have to consider other people and factor in relationships and just others in general. And so with Mercury here giving support to Mars, Mars is able to be more decisive. People are able to be more decisive in a way that's not as normal for Mars in this position. Mars is being ruled by Venus down here. So again, the action planet, the warrior planet, has to be a little more compromising, diplomatic, trying to be more balanced and graceful with others, and not just overly independent in this particular phase. But with Mercury sextile Mars all week long, that's going to start to speed things up, especially give it a few days as Mercury builds up that momentum forward. But it's just going to be a lot more mental stimulation. Things are quicker, happening more. Things are moving forward into new territory this week and beyond. We have better opportunity, like I said, to be more decisive in our thinking and our action and our communications, plans, the way we're looking at things, especially the fact that Mercury's coming off of that retrograde. We've completed a certain process. Now, with that said, Mercury is still deep within its retrograde shadow, so the entire retrograde phase is not complete just yet until we get to the last week of August and enter the Virgo new moon cycle. But we're getting there, and things are going to really start to seem different, and we're going to be thinking differently. Mercury Mars is also great for mechanical skills or just having, working with your hands, and just a lot of skillful technical things as well can be beneficial in better ways here. And Mercury, is being ruled by this very strong sun that's still in Leo. So this particular Mars is doing better than the average Mars in Libra. And now Mars is also coming off of this opposition to Saturn and Neptune. Now, right now, the moon has just come into Aries and is making an opposition to Mars today. So today is going to be a big turning point, again, with things really moving forward in more decisive, more direct ways. Now, the other major aspect we have is Venus in Cancer that's going to be aligning with the nodes of fate. Venus trine the North Node of Destiny. That's going to be exact on Friday, August 15. And that just shows that everything about Venus is wrapped up in fate and destiny this week. So relationships could be fateful, money, financial matters, real estate, home and family relationships, property stuff, the homeland, if you look at it on a bigger level here of Cancer. And of course, Venus and Jupiter are still conjunct and still right next to each other all this week. So wherever you have Cancer in your birth chart, That's where the most nurturing, the most supportive area of the chart is right now, especially if you have personal planets around those degrees of 14, 15, 16 as you're moving forward this week. But yeah, just know that whatever happens perhaps around Friday could be very fateful and have a long-term effect on the future in an easier, positive way here about money and relationship overall, or something of value that's shaping the future. And it does look like on August 15, Friday, the moon is connecting to Jupiter and Venus. So there's a lot of easy aspects for the first part of the day. And so that could be potentially a good day to be looking at things of value. If you need to make a big purchase of some kind, I think that perhaps Friday could be a great day for it. Like I said, if you need to do anything about real estate, home improvements, or just anything that has value, that could be a good time for it. It also looks like it could be a pleasurable day, generally speaking, for people. Now, as the day goes on and we get into Friday night, the moon will run into a square with the sun, which is the last quarter moon phase, typically showing a little bit of a challenge that does come in later. But overall, those 2 days, Friday into Saturday, there's a lot of easy aspects overall, besides that one hard aspect of moon square sun, which is where the inner and the outer are at odds with each other. So I'll talk about that as I'm going through the chart day by day. But overall, there's some decent aspects here. There's always going to be some moments throughout the week when there's ups and downs. Looks like those are the only main aspects, though. So today, the moon has just changed signs for a new moon, not a new moon, but a new moon phase, a new energy for the next couple days. And the moon is waning all through Aries this week, all through Taurus, and all through Gemini in the first part of Cancer as we enter next week. So it looks like one of the best phases this week will be when the moon is in Taurus, exalted, ruled by this Venus next to Jupiter. But of course, Taurus and Leo are at odds with each other. So there'll be a couple squares the moon will have to get through, plus the square to Pluto every time it enters Taurus. So there'll be a few moments there with the moon in Taurus that has some challenge, but then that's when the Mercury sextile Mars comes in. We also see that there is a mystical rectangle here going on from Mercury and Mars. It's not perfect. It's, not as tight as I would like it to be, but it's probably still relevant. And mystical rectangle is where there's a lot of opposing forces, a lot of different influences, but they're connecting in a way that helps people work with those contradictory dynamics. And so we can kind of find a better balance with these different pulls in different ways and how we're working with all these different energetics here between Aries, Aquarius, Libra, and Leo. So it's considered a positive aspect. And then we see this big minor grand trine. This is the bigger outer planet configuration going on that I've talked about all year long. And the moon is literally going through there this morning as, the day is starting here, really showing that we are, in a sense, in a new era. It's just that it's going to be even more obvious by next year. I think this is just the beginning of it, but technically kind of what we're seeing in the world is a glimpse of the future and what this new era is all about. So for the first couple days with the moon in Aries, it's going to be ruled by this Mars in Libra and this opposition between self and others that we're trying to balance out. And then the moon will be in Taurus, ruled by Venus, one of the best phases, like I said, coming up. And then when the moon is in Gemini, that'll be ruled by this Mercury, really activating that mental stimulation, that more decisiveness, good, strong communications, passionate communications. And then when the moon is in Cancer, it's in its own sign and will be applying towards Jupiter and Venus up in the sky. So when the moon next week reaches Venus and Jupiter there, that's going to be a pretty abundant moment to have those three planets all together. All right, so that's what we have for the week ahead. I'm going to be going through it all, of course, day by day and looking at all these aspects. So check the description. I'll have all the aspects written out for you. And I had a lot of new subscribers, so thank you. I appreciate it over this last week. All right, so with that said, let's start here on Tuesday, August 12. And like I said, the moon has just ingressed Aries for the next 2.5 days. Really early this morning, the moon was moving over Saturn and Neptune, activating a little bit of that pressure, that tension of this new era, you could say, that we're moving into. But again, now that the moon is in Aries, it's ruled by this Mars in Libra. So usually here with the moon in Aries, it's all about a phase about the self and more independence and doing things on your own in a way, that you're kind of drawn into what you want. Again, your independence and your individuality, and things tend to speed up here with the moon moving through Aries. It's more instinctive. This is a fire sign, so it's more passionate. Plus, we have the Leo still going on, so we have a lot of fire right now, which is a lot more outward, a lot more passionate. For the last couple of days, the moon was in Pisces, which was more watery, more sensitive, and more behind the scenes. And now people are going to generally be pulled more outward for the next couple of days here. But again, it could also bring up a lot about relationship in this particular phase because it's being ruled by Mars in Libra. That says we need to find this balance. And that's the main aspect that's coming in strong for most of the rest of today, is that opposition between Moon and Mars. So there also might be a lot of activity today, a little bit of some tension, some opposition that we're trying to work out. But like I said, there's a mystical rectangle where it tends to show people are able to find this balance that's necessary for a better flow of energy today overall. But it's still in opposition about the self, our independence, our freedom, what we want to do here versus having to consider other people of Libra, one-on-one connections with people, trying to be more diplomatic and graceful and trying to basically compromise, and then also factoring in thought, whereas fire here is more instinctive. Like I said, Libra is an air sign, which is about thinking about things and, being more objective. And so using the mind, basically. But it also comes back to, if we follow the trail here, the moon in Aries ruled by Mars, Mars in Libra ruled by Venus, and Venus is conjunct Jupiter. So looking at the market right now, I have my phone up on the side here, and it looks like the SPY, the S&P 500, is at 639, moving towards 640. So that's another all-time new high that just came in. So there was a little bit of a dip this last couple weeks, and now the S&P 500 is entering new territory at another new high. So that makes sense. Like I said, with Venus and Jupiter, that's a very abundant place right there. And I would think also, later this week, perhaps around Friday, there could be a pretty good day too, I would imagine. Always invest at your own risk, though. I'm just kind of trying to show the correlation between astrology and Venus type of things. But because the circumstances today of Aries has that connection to Venus, because again, it's ruled by Mars and Mars is ruled by Venus. And then Venus is ruled by the moon. So it kind of comes right back. So Venus is wrapped up into everything today in the circumstances. And again, Venus rules money and value of things in a very positive place with Jupiter that's trying to expand the value of certain things right now. So that also brings up, though, this dynamic of self, others, and family, or safety and security things. Whereas Moon in Aries is more able to step outside of comfort zone, be willing to initiate things and take a little more of a risk, be more daring with stuff, which generally Cancer is a little bit at odds with that wants to be more protective and safe and secure. There could be a sense of the need for being a little more protective, though, because they are all connecting with Mars in this overall dynamic. So again, these different influences pulling us in different ways, and perhaps we can find that balance naturally in an easy way with flowing energy based on the mystical rectangle happening. And then the moon is also sextile Pluto and Uranus today as it was moving through the apex of this minor grand trine. But that was super early, so that's already done by the time you're listening to this report. But again, the moon is really connecting to everything in this new way, this kind of new vibe for the world that's coming in strong. So as the day goes on, it's mostly going to be that opposition. Again, that kind of does show a lot of activity, a little more of some tension that we're working with. And then the moon connects to both the Mars and Mercury sextile. And the day ends with the moon trine Mercury. So again, it kind of kicks off this new drive for people, this new instinct to be more decisive and more direct in what they're doing with communication and overall action. But the heart and the mind are in alignment, and they're both in fire signs. So people are going to be more speaking directly, instinctively, impulsively, just saying what's on their mind. And again, things start to really speed up from this point forward until the moon gets to Taurus, and then things will slow down again a little bit. All right, so that's Tuesday. Let me move this forward here. And we get to Wednesday. On August 13, we have a few aspects here. It looks like the moon is squaring this Venus and this Jupiter. First thing on early Wednesday morning. So this is going to be pre-market. So by the time, the market's open, it'll be done already. But early morning hours, there is this tension between the feelings, the mood, the circumstances, and the need for indulgences and pleasure. So for people, first thing in the morning, perhaps for people on the East Coast, if you're up early, and then I would say it's most relevant for people in Europe where it's already later in the morning. Moon square Venus and Jupiter shows a little bit of overindulgence. Too much of a good thing could be happening, or people have a big desire, a big appetite for something, and they want something. Circumstances could be just overinflated and too much of a good thing potentially here. So be careful of spending too much money here on Wednesday morning if you're up and about early first thing, or if you're in Europe, like I said. I'd be a little bit cautious if you are buying a big ticket item here first thing on Wednesday morning if you're in Europe. Make sure that the price is right. Make sure it has the correct value if you are dealing with anything financial. I think it's mostly just a temporary kind of mood, a big mood for pleasure and indulgences. And we might have a little bit of a issue with that, with the moon square Venus. We're not always completely satisfied with whatever's happening in that moment. But it's only a temporary moment, and it will pass as the day goes on. And then the moon moves into an in conjunction with the South Node. South Node being in Virgo. So this is going to be later in the morning, afternoon for some other people. And that's an in conjunction to doing what we want, having this mood for independence and freedom versus having to deal with work or service and health issues and just the more practical side of life that requires our attention during this moment in the late morning of Wednesday. So adjusting between these two areas, a little bit of irritation and adjustment comes in. And then the moon is trine the sun for the rest of Wednesday, which is typically one of the better phases of the lunar cycle when the moon and sun are in harmony. The inner and the outer are cooperating with each other. And that's because they're both in fire signs. And the sun loves Aries, and the moon is pretty happy in Leo. So this is a pretty nice trine going on overall. It's still very passionate and fiery and instinctive. It's more bright and sunny. There tends to just be more cooperation in the world or in the dynamics going on. And this is going to be, looks like the 4 o'clock hour on the West Coast. So evening. hours for everybody else in the United States, and then late Wednesday night into early morning hours for Europe. But you can find the time in the description, and then just find your local time based on what time I have written in the description for Wednesday here with this aspect. So if you want to do something, this is a great time to do it. Again, it's usually just having a better mood. Again, how you're feeling on the inner life. Now, I shouldn't say how you're feeling, because again, this is general, and not every single person, all these people in the whole world, are feeling the same way off of transits. All these transits really affect people in different ways. But again, I can only speak, in this general way for the background for the world. But it all depends on your personal chart. If you have a lot of planets that are at odds with Aries, well, then this might not be as good for you. But generally speaking, it is good, where things are more flowing and more cooperative, more passionate, creative, and fun, and sunny and bright. But the moon is also approaching Chiron, and that's going to be the following day in the early morning hours. So this is kind of like that last moment before there starts to be some more tension that comes in here in a more difficult way, I think, for Thursday. But Wednesday, this is the last aspect, and again, it's a pretty good aspect overall. It's still being ruled by Mars and relationship dynamics, so that can also play out within relationships as well. So that's Wednesday. Let's get to the following day here on Thursday, August 14. And again, the first aspect is the moon conjunct Chiron. So that's, again, Chiron is where there's vulnerabilities and sensitivities about the self that could be going through that moment of circumstances, early morning hours. So this could affect people that are up really late on Friday night into Thursday morning. Also, it's just wise to be a little more cautious, because this is ruled by Mars, and Mars is in the sign of people. So there could also be dynamics with others that cause some sensitivity, or even wounds or other issues that could be coming up. But generally, it's just a more vulnerable, a little bit more uncomfortable about the self in this particular way for a few hours here. But there's always a chance, on different places around the world, there could be a little more conflict during this time of early morning hours on Thursday. Sometimes violence or something like that. Only with this Chiron in Aries, because Aries is the head, and it's more, again, it deals with Mars, which is more aggressive, and sometimes it can be more about physical injuries or accidents or things like that. But I don't think most people will have a problem with that. And then there's going to be a change of mood and circumstances for most of the day on Thursday. As people are waking up, the moon has ingress Taurus. And this is where the moon is exalted. So this is one of the best moon phases that that we can go through. And this is where things now want to start to slow down. And yet, this is also the day where Mercury starts to make that, well, technically Mars is making it, but we call it Mercury sextile Mars. So there's a more decisiveness, and there is a sense of things that are still kind of fast and speeding up, but the mood and the circumstances want to slow down, get more practical, get more earthly, get more sensual as the moon comes into Taurus. Also, with the moon coming into Taurus, this is a phase for the next 2.5 days that's generally more about money and resources and things of value. Because now the moon, the circumstances, is being ruled by this Venus next to Jupiter in Cancer. So again, this could be a day. Well, like I said, I think the following day is going to be even better if you have to do any real estate. But it still puts more emphasis over here on the home and the family and property and safety and security and comfort and the more practical side of life. Now, the moon does have to get through some issues. As it comes into Taurus, it has to square Pluto. And that is going to be the first aspect that the moon goes through, is this square every time now. We have to deal with this for the next 20 years, every time the moon is in Taurus. So circumstances are connecting to Pluto, the power dynamic within Aquarius, the group and the community, friends and things. So a little bit of a clash in mood and feelings, perhaps at first on Thursday morning, about how we're feeling about the community or other people, social activity, and just the overall undercurrents of power and control. And sometimes this can be a sense of circumstances on Thursday morning could be kind of forced to change from where they've been the last couple of days. So I call it a forced transformation phase when the moon is square Pluto. It's also a first quarter with Pluto, so it comes back to last week when the moon was conjunct Pluto and there was seeds being planted for things that want to start moving forward this week in regards to politics, community, friends, science and technology stuff from that full moon in Aquarius. Well, now we're going to see more of the transformation happening here on Thursday based on the seeds being planted last week. And it's kind of, again, forced to show changes that are a little bit more uncomfortable or a little bit just emotional intensity is possible for some people. Mood swings first thing on Thursday morning. And we also have the moon in conjunct to this Mars as well. So now we're having to adjust to this strong dynamic of more passion, more decisiveness, more action, where the moon would rather be taking things slower and more stable and more pleasurable. But there's still action. There's things that are still happening that we might have to do and we have to adjust to. So we might have to adjust this need to keep things calm and more pleasant and beautiful. And, you know, with the moon in Taurus, it generally shows people want to make other people feel comfortable around them, not to stir up a lot of drama or things like that. But at the same time, the moon is building squares with Leo. So Leo squares can sometimes show drama, and people are uncomfortable with that when the moon is in Taurus, and then having to adjust to the more, the more assertive side of life with Mars, having to be more diplomatic and graceful in a way that's not as easy, perhaps, first thing on Thursday. And then the moon is square Mercury. So this is where the moon, the heart, the mind and the heart are on two different pages. So this may not be the best time if you have to publish or write or speak or communicate, network. I would kind of wait for things to smooth out a little bit. Now, one of the problems with that is when we have a square, it shows that there's a need for activity. It kind of shows that people are pushed into taking action in some way, whether they like it or they don't. So in some cases, this can be like, well, I have to do this. I have to communicate. I have to run this errand. I have to make this phone call, so it adds that tension to it all. But if you're able to wait, if you have control and you don't have to do it, then I would kind of hold off a little bit for this dynamic to get past it and to align better, even the following day, when there's a lot better aspects, if you have to do something like that. Or again, if it's not, I wouldn't recommend publishing something on YouTube or, something like that around this time when this aspect is exact. You can get away with it. I'm sure it'll be fine. It just may not be the smoothest. And I would definitely avoid it like right when it's exact. So if you look in the description and get the exact time and find your local time, just kind of avoid it if you have to. If you don't have to do it. And that's just where the feelings, the mood is at odds with the way people are thinking and communicating in this moment. But it's only for a few hours. It's not that big of a deal. And overall, this is where Mars has caught up to this sextile with Mercury now. So I think it's more, again, just more assertive, more passionate, more direct. Even the way people are communicating, within a relationship, it can be a little more direct, whereas the Taurus moon wants to keep things more calm and beautiful and stable and nice for everyone involved. So just a little bit of tension in that. But overall, the last aspect is Mercury sextile Mars. So this is the beginning of this strong dynamic for the rest of the week between these two. Again, instincts should be pretty good and strong. They should be trusted overall. And again, it's good for mechanical skills, getting things done, being more decisive, like I said, more direct in communication, more passionate, but yet still having a little bit of grace and somewhat some of balance within that as well at its best. No guarantees, but that's the goal there, is to be direct, but yet not overly abrasive or something, All right, so that's what we have for Thursday. Let's move this forward to Friday on August 15, and this is where we do have a lot of easier aspects going on for the first part of the day, including the moon sextile Jupiter and sextile Venus. And that's going to be, looks like a little bit later, 14 degrees. So it comes in, first thing in the morning for people on the West Coast, and it's late morning for people on the East Coast, probably late afternoon if you're in Europe. So good time of day for this to happen. This could definitely affect the markets first thing in the morning on Friday, if the markets are open. I believe they are. So circumstances with this exalted moon connecting to the two best planets in astrology in this very abundant way. The moon is exalted. So this seems like a really good aspect overall. It can be more on a personal level. There might be some positivity in the world too in different ways happening, but this can be more on a personal level of self-indulgences. It's a good connection, like I said, for potential real estate deals. If you do have any real estate deals on Friday, I think that there is a strong potential that they could work out for you, generally speaking. But there's always a potential too that there's something for the future on this day. So if you have any deals that are happening, because Venus is also trying the North Node of Destiny, it could potentially play out at a later date, but there's still things happening on this day that could be connected to value, pleasure, money, resources, home and family stuff could be pretty good, pretty decent on this day. Better relationship dynamics overall. A better sense of being satisfied and content with what's happening here. And again, it's more earthly, it's more sensual and pleasurable overall. But again, this is a fateful day for Venus. So again, whatever's happening in regards to relationships and financial stuff is fateful. It does have that long-term effect on the future, and it should be in a good way. So if you have to do anything of value, or if you want to buy a big ticket item, this is the better time to do it now. If there's a big purchase you need to make, you might really want to consider doing it first thing on Friday. There could also just be general flowing good vibes, good mood, generosity here, and things like that for Friday morning. And Friday, I think that kind of sets the tone for the rest of the day, but we are going to build up to some challenge on Friday night. Like I said, the moon is also connected to the South Node as well, and Venus is connected to the South Node, things of the past. This could also be beneficial in regards to health, something about health could come in, news or information. Overall, because Mercury is now starting to build up momentum forward off of that retrograde connecting to Mars, there could be important information for people, including the issues of health for certain people, since Mercury does rule that South Node in Virgo. That is talking about major health stuff for some people. There could be a turning point this week around health issues. Again, some sort of news, information, results, that just make the mind a little more direct and decisive about where the person is headed for the future now that things are becoming more clear. And then here on Friday, again, there could be something that just feels a lot better for people about all that in different ways. So that's going to set the tone for most of the day until Friday night, when that moon makes that square to the sun here, which is going to be late on Friday night for people on the West Coast. It's going to be early morning hours of Saturday morning if you're on the East Coast or in Europe. So for most of the day on Friday, it's pretty good vibes. It's just really late here into Saturday that we start to get some challenge again. Although Friday, there's a lot of easy aspects going on overall. It's just this one dynamic, which is, again, the last quarter moon phase of this current cycle of Leo. So this is the crisis in consciousness phase based on an evolutionary perspective. That's one of the only evolutionary astrology perspectives I use. But I think it's a good fit for describing this phase. It's the inner life at odds with the outer life and the focus. So how people feel, versus what they're focused on are on two different pages. Can sometimes be a little more dramatic, but the moon here in Taurus is still strong. It's exalted. It doesn't want to get wrapped up in a lot of drama and conflict. But the sun in Leo is very strong as well. These are two very strong positions here. So even though it's a square, I don't think it's as bad as a normal square between the moon and the sun, because they're both very strong and they can get through things a lot easier in these signs. But there could be some tension, especially if you have personal planets in your chart around these degrees of 23, 24 degrees of Taurus and Leo. So if you look at your chart and you have a square in your own chart between two planets at 23, 24 degrees of Taurus, and you have a planet at 23 or 24 Leo, you already have a square going on. Well, this last quarter moon up in the sky is connected to you. It could show that you're really wrapped up in this challenge of some kind, but it's only a temporary challenge. It's just for the rest of, it's the early morning hours of Saturday, basically Friday night into Saturday morning. So, but that's how you can know if you're affected by it. Now, if you have 23 or 24 degrees of Aquarius or 23, 24 of Scorpio, then there's also a little bit of a challenge for you. But it's mostly if you have aspects in your chart in this same way. You don't have to have the moon or sun there. Any planet there in this square will be activated. And then generally it's just showing that the world is in this phase where we have to work something out about how we feel versus what we're focused on, how we think. Again, the crisis in consciousness around something here. The moon is being ruled by the Venus, and the sun is in its own sign ruling itself. So it comes back to Venus things: the home, the family, property, the homeland, safety, security, comfort. The more bold, dramatic, outward side, the more social side, versus keeping things more stable and calm and the value of certain things. So I don't think it's that big of a deal, but it is the last quarter that we have to get through on late Friday. So sometimes there can be some sort of a complication, maybe a little bit of a lack of cooperation for a few hours, or just some pressure, some mood stuff here for some people. And then it passes for Saturday. As we get to Saturday, August 16, the moon is at the last degrees of Taurus and approaching Uranus up in the sky. So the mood is going to start to change now after it went through that last quarter moon, away from this, really indulgent, stable type of vibe into a little more volatility as we get into the weekend. And the first aspect is the moon changing signs. The moon will ingress Gemini. That's going to be first, pretty early in the morning, not super early. It's the 9 o'clock hour on the West Coast. So the afternoon for other people, there'll be a mood change from that stable, earthly Taurus into this mental stimulation of Gemini. And now that the moon comes into Gemini, it's being ruled by this Mercury, which is sextile Mars. And again, a lot more mental stimulation, a lot more passion, communications. Now it's not as stable circumstances. The mood isn't as stable. And the moon is right next to Uranus. So again, it shows a little bit of volatility, a little bit of unpredictability, excitement in the air, a little bit of this revolutionary vibe. And plus, as the moon reaches Uranus, it's connecting to this minor grand trine to all the outer planets of this new era. So again, we're getting another taste of the future here, and it's a lot more technical. The moon is connecting to Uranus and Pluto, so the group, the community, technology, strong communications and networking, just this more curious mind. Typically, the moon here in Gemini wants to show that people want to be more lighthearted, playful, witty, clever, doing a variety of different things, just this more youthful vibe. But the moon is also connecting to Saturn, serious things, Neptune, dreams, ambitions, fantasies, Pluto, power and community and friends, and Uranus, things that are different and a little bit rebellious and innovative. So all these different influences are connecting to the circumstances and the general mood out and about. So things are a little bit wild, a little bit different here on Saturday late morning, Saturday afternoon. And again, now it comes right back to Mercury and this Leo energy that's more outward, fun, creative, social, self-expressive, really bold communications, and again, just a lot of mental stimulation and doing a variety of different things perhaps. But there's still a decisiveness going on. Mercury and Mars are still sextile. So people can really be more direct with their feelings, with their activity, and everything happening. All right, so that is a change. And again, the moon is connecting to all those different planets. And that's going to be the vibe for most of the day until the moon also once again connects to the Mercury-Mars sextile, really bringing that closer in. And that's going to be more towards Saturday night. Well, moon trine Mars, sextile Mercury. So this is all, it's forming another minor grand trine. This is on a more of a lower level. You can see there's two there. This is the bigger one for the outer planets, for the new era, for the new world that's being built and established. And this is a temporary one that the moon is connecting to with this decisiveness of Mercury, Mars, of better decision making, again, better action, more impulsive and instinctive about what to do. And so this is a better time to be connecting to communications with people, especially once the moon gets past that Uranus a little more, and now connecting to Mercury by Saturday evening and Saturday night for most people here. And with that moon trine Mars, it just shows that opening for, again, better action, better feeling better about, again, decisiveness. Now, it's still air. The Gemini and the Libra is air signs, which is still intellectual, objective. It's more about thinking and communicating and things that are up in the head. But then it's connecting to the Mercury, which can bring it down and show this more fiery, passionate side to it all. So Saturday night could be pretty fun and passionate overall. I think it seems like a pretty decent night. I mean, I'm sure there's still going to be issues here and there around the world. But overall, I think it could be a good time if you are planning anything social for Saturday evening, Saturday night. Looks pretty decent. So that's what we have there. And then we get to Sunday on August 17. The moon is still in Gemini, being ruled by Mercury. This passionate communication, moving forward on new thoughts, new ideas, news, information. That's just better in alignment with people. And we have two aspects here on Sunday, and one is the moon is going to be T-squared the nodes of fate later on in the day. So it's a fateful day on Sunday. This is coming in the evening or afternoon, evening for some people. It's nighttime for other people. I would consider all day, though. The moon is building up to this all day. So just consider Sunday a fateful day as the circumstances connect to the nodes of fate at a crossroads in a sense. So whatever is happening could have a long-term effect on the future. Important communications, information, news, media could come out. Anything about traveling, transportation could have fateful results for good or bad. In this way, it can go either way. In some cases, it can be positive. In others, it can be difficult. But this is also where Mercury catches back up to another exact sextile with Mars. And the moon here in this T-square is being ruled by the Mercury in that sextile with Mars. So it's still very passionate and strong, fiery communications, a little more dramatic for Sunday. But good skills, good problem solving overall. But for whatever reason, it's a fateful day. And again, those are the two main aspects for Sunday. So it's still a lot about the mind, a lot of mental stimulation, doing a variety of different things here. For August 17. And so then we get to the following day on Monday, August 18. We do have several aspects for next Monday, and it looks like the moon will be at the last few degrees of Gemini before it changes signs. So the first part of Monday will be different from the second half of Monday. But the first part of the day, the moon is sextile the sun. So this is another pretty decent part of the lunar cycle where the moon and the sun are in more harmony. The inner and the outer are more in harmony. Again, Gemini and Leo connecting. The passion, the heart, the mind, communications, variety of different things and activities that are more passionate and fun, typically more sunny and bright first thing on Monday morning. Just feeling more cooperation, generally speaking. Plus, the moon is also sextile Chiron, so people can feel better about themselves, have more confidence in what they're doing, be more self-expressive and direct. But then, like I said, as the day goes on, the moon will change signs in ingress Cancer, where it's extremely strong. But at first, the moon has to get through a few challenges here. With the square to Saturn and Neptune will be the first square. But generally, for the next 2.5 days, the moon is going to be in the sign in a very strong position for feelings, emotions, sensitivity. And this brings up a lot more water now. And the water is clashing with the fire. So things get a little bit steamy. So once the moon gets past this dynamic, then it's going to be in pretty good territory as it's going to be approaching Jupiter and Venus next week. But that will be next week's report. And in the meantime, there is some challenges here. Some mood and circumstances are a little bit challenged on the self, relationships, and safety, security, and comfort, and home and family stuff at first. So this could also be on a global level for Monday. Some new dynamics on a global level about the homeland and decisions and rules and laws that people are picking up on. It's a little more heavy in this moment for a few hours, first thing on Monday morning. Actually, this is afternoon, I'm sorry. Monday afternoon is this dynamic change. So things coming out the second half of Monday in the government, rules and laws. Again, a little bit of a heavier vibe, a little bit of emotional confusion, doubts, uncertainty, a little bit of a draining of an energy, where now the mood shows that people want to be more inward, more safe and secure in their home or their safe place. The Cancerian vibe. It's a little more guarded, a little more protective, a little more serious in this particular dynamic. And it's a first quarter challenge from what's happening right now on Tuesday that I'm making this video. Well, a week from this is the first quarter of that conjunction that's happening right now when I'm making this report. So things that are starting on Tuesday, now we get it a week later and we're challenged to move those things forward. Whatever's coming out for you today, as I'm making this on Tuesday, August 12, now on August 18, Monday, you're connected to those things in some way and you're having to move forward with them. But it's just generally a little bit of a heavier vibe, serious vibe for a few hours. And then the last aspect for Monday will be the moon in conjunct to Pluto as well. Again, having to adjust to the social side of life, friends and community, politics, and, just the outer world where the power and the intensity is versus where the feelings are that want to be in safe, secure, comfortable environment. So once we get past this, then things can mellow out. Now, next Tuesday, the moon will have to square Mars first. And then once the moon gets past Mars, then the moon will start to align with Jupiter and Venus. Let me just take a peek of when that is. So just know the second half of Monday, it's a different mood that will set the tone for the next 2.5 days. And then, on Tuesday, early morning, the moon will square Mars. And then later, on Tuesday next week, when I come back for next week's report, the moon, Venus, and Jupiter are all conjunct, which is actually a pretty sweet looking conjunction right there with an exalted Jupiter. The moon is happy, Venus is happy, and it doesn't go anywhere else because the Jupiter-Venus conjunction is being ruled by the moon. So it's all kind of just stuck right there in Cancer. So it's pretty sweet alignment, really indulgent, really nurturing, really supportive for next Tuesday. And then it looks like next Tuesday, the sun is also going to be trine Chiron. And that can be, again, great for self-confidence and feeling just a lot better about the self. So that looks pretty nice for next Tuesday. I would imagine that next Tuesday could be pretty good for the markets as well. So, yeah, looking at the SPY for one last time, right now it's at 640. So that's an all-time new high. Even right now. All right. So that's what I have for you folks. I hope that's helpful. Appreciate you watching, and I'm wishing you the very best. Have a great week.